Okay, very brief, but I feel this is a strongly guided by God message. For all my fellow ethnic minority people in this country who may be struggling with their mental health or just well-being in general, and are either thinking of or are accessing support through provisions such as NHS mental health support or support through their institutions that they're either studying at or working at or volunteering at. I'm sorry to be a bit of a downer here, but please do not entrust these these so-called professionals that you think you know with so much personal information, especially if you even get a slight hunch or feeling or instinct that they're not that trustworthy, or that they're not being very transparent with you, or that they are misusing your information. Honestly, get yourself out of there before they put you in trouble for their own gain. And I tell you this as someone who has been heavily violated by many services in this region, including the Greater Manchester Mental Health Service. They are so corrupt, they are so unbelievably bad, they are so one-sided, and they only want the one-size-fits-all sort of clients or service users or patients. They misuse your information, they have absolutely no compassion. And if you don't believe me, please read the reviews, please do your investigations into it, because as a service user with lived experience, but also as an observer of how they've treated other people, oh my goodness, is it corrupt? You have to remember, these are people who are so-called qualified professionals, they are paid professionals, they have duties of care, they are given DBS certificates, they are supposed to be checked, vetted, and they're the very people who are damaging vulnerable adults' mental health even further. I say this not to just be a complainant, but because I genuinely feel for other people who are in vulnerable situations, whether or not you're suicidal, whether or not you are young or an adult, whether or not you are able to use some coping mechanisms yourself, or you're completely at crisis point. I just don't want anyone else to be at crisis point and then think that one of these services is going to help them, when in fact they'll just patronise you even more, they'll make false allegations about you, they will, especially if you're an ethnic minority. Honestly, my one key suggestion would be, even if it costs you a lot of money, or even if it means not accessing these sorts of services at all, go for a professional who is of the same ethnic background, who is a lot more culturally aware. Because whether you like it or not, an English or white or Caucasian or non-ethnic minority person is just not going to understand the additional burden of being an ethnic minority in this country, whether or not you were born here. They're not going to understand. And I say this because even when I tried to even slightly touch upon the matters of race and racism and racial discrimination and the feelings of inadequacy and being outcast in spaces where I still, for example, I inappropriately get asked, where am I really from? Those stereotypical known questions, but also things that are not that widely talked about, such as comments like, all your people look the same, or how do you, I've had professionals ask me stupid questions like, how did you learn to speak English? Well, I went to school, I was born here. How do you think? I've had them ask, I've had not just ask questions, but I've had them literally change the topic, or say, you're just going to have to accept it, or, and this is not helpful. They should be spending their paid time exploring the real mental health impacts of being a victim of racism, of being a recipient of racism, of being an observer and listener of racism. It's not acceptable for them to just dismiss your complaints over issues such as being mistreated or, for example, I went to an interview and the interviewer, a director, was constantly talking badly about the Asian community and no one spoke up, no one said anything to him. I don't know if that was out of fear, they were desperate to get the job. He consistently talked about women's appearance, and every time I've tried to speak about incidents like that, the mental health professionals just completely fob me off, ignore me, dismiss me, and it's just not acceptable, because not only do experiences like that stay with you, but you've got to think about the cost of, you know, preparing for and attending an interview, and the outfit and the travel and the preparation and the time and the money that it costs, and you go there and you just experience these sexist, lookist, racist employers, interviewers, directors. And then don't get me even started on the actual experiences of the few jobs that I have been offered where the directors, the employees, the colleagues, even customers have, you know, mistreated me because of my appearance and my race. So honestly, I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent here, but I highly suggest you either just do not access mental health support in this region or within NHS services, because they are corrupt, and if you don't believe me, look at all the reviews, do your own investigations, observations, whatever you want to do, but just please do not make your mental health even worse by accessing services that are just not fit for purpose. And especially I speak on behalf of like other ethnic minorities and people from, say, the South Asian background. You may very well regret sharing your vulnerabilities, your insecurities, your lowest points, etc. with these professionals, because, for example, in my case, they've mocked my suicide attempts, they have mocked my self-harm attempts, they have mocked my bullying experiences, losses, failures, bereavement, you name it, every possible vulnerability I spoke about. They dismissed it, they had the audacity to call me delusional, they, you know, it's not acceptable, and I really feel for other people out there, whether they are young teenagers or adults, who are simply just trying to access some well-being support and instead they get violated. And in my case, for example, what happened at the university, with the image violations, I firmly believe that the mental health support people were involved in the non-consensual dissemination of data involving me, because they knew all of my vulnerabilities, they knew exactly what would trigger me, what would hurt me, what would offend me, and I believe strongly that they maliciously collaborated with that student, with that course tutor, with everybody else involved in, you know, retaining and disseminating the images, and I feel that they purposely put me through this horrendous ordeal for which they still have not been punished. But I've asked the accreditation people of these specific individuals to have them checked, have them investigated, because if I'm complaining, there's got to be at least one other person out there who has also had really bad experiences with them, and the more people that speak up, the better. Honestly, I don't know what the mental health services are like in the south of England or elsewhere, but in terms of everything I've accessed here in the northwest of England as a British-born but unfortunately ethnic minority female adult with disabilities and chronic illnesses, I've not found any decent mental health support. I haven't yet properly looked into private counselling or therapy or wellbeing support. I've briefly delved into like private consultations for healthcare, and I have actually tried BetterHelp, but I've not found any of those useful. So, but in terms of other private services, I've not accessed them. But yeah, I just genuinely strongly feel cold. I've been thinking about this the last week. Just, you don't want to put yourself through the risk of not only already being vulnerable with your existing health conditions or mental vulnerabilities or whatever, but then what you don't want is further violations down the line at the hands of these people who have, oh yeah, and by the way, not to scare you off, but they might record you as well without your consent. So be very, very, very mindful. You shouldn't have to live like this. You shouldn't have to live in fear. When someone says something is a confidential environment, you should be able to trust that it's a confidential environment. But like with many corrupt people in this world, a lot of these so-called professionals who are highly paid and supposed to be highly qualified and ethical will do things against your consent for their own gain, whether that's financial gain, social gain, personal gain, professional gain, who knows. But yeah, I pray in the mighty name of Jesus that nobody out there goes through the violations that I've gone through, and just please be very discerning with what sort of support services you access, who you speak to, what you say and what you do. And I also pray that you find the correct, righteous, ethical and truly helpful support that you need, because all of us deserve access to equitable well-being support, especially in this day and age. And I know things are really mad and bad at the moment, but I firmly believe that things can and will change for the better, because there's a lot of people like myself who are trying to advocate for better, and even paid professionals who are able to see through the BS in their own field, thankfully, are trying to advocate on behalf of service users and patients too. So I just wanted to add my quick voice there that, you know, unfortunately, whilst you should not have to live in fear and you shouldn't have to feel paranoid in so-called confidential settings, it's also important to face the reality and be very discerning about who you're sharing information with. Ensure you get someone who you can fully trust from the start, even if you have to pay lots of money, even if you have to specifically look for a professional with your own ethnic minority background or those sorts of similarities. And I sincerely hope that you get the help you need, because just like any physical health condition, mental health conditions deserve just as much care and attention and provisions and treatments and yeah. I hope that made sense. I'm very shaky and uncomfortable today. I've had a really, really, really tough day, but I'm just trying to self-manage my conditions, and I pray that everybody else out there gets the help they need. Thank you.